Well, hello there.
Good
How
morning,
are you?
Victoria. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Mayor Charles Lacey.
Welcome to Trotwood Park.
Oh, goodness. I love this pavilion. Well, it is so great to see you again.
Yeah.
It's been a year.
It has been a year, and I'm staying involved and interested, but I'm glad I'm not a principal in what's going on these days.
So, what's been going on this past year? What happened? You were the mayor for 10 years. What,
Yep.
2000?
2010 to 2021.
Okay, and you just left in the middle of your term.
I did because things had changed. What I had signed up for was not the case anymore, and I just found myself, as I said at the time, unable to represent the city that I had loved doing so for the first 8 years of my 10 years. In the last 2 years, it was not the city government that I could find myself standing up and being the spokesman for. A lot of things were going wrong. It was something of a disenfranchisement of the citizens, more to the aggregation of power by the select people who were running the city at that time.
Okay.
I just couldn't be the face of that.
One thing I recently learned when you left, I was trying to dive into it as everybody, what's going
Yeah.
on. The mayor doesn't have a vote in the city of Winter Springs. So you really had no say. You were more of a ceremonial position, if you will.
Yeah, the position in Winter Springs is unique from just about any other city that I've run into, definitely unique in Seminole County, and that the mayor presides over the city commission. The mayor is the official spokesman for the city, but in terms of actual policy making, it's a rather passive position. There are certain circumstances, such as vetoing ordinances or allowing certain things to come before the commission or not, that give some influence, but it is largely, as you say, Victoria, a ceremonial position. And it's because of that fact that it was my responsibility to go out in the public and represent what was going on in the city, but not having the influence to actually control the events of the city, that made it an untenable position for me.
Wow, I had no idea. Interesting. And so what were the issues? I mean, we all know development. You know, they say no development, and then there's all this development. Can you kind of give me some insight on what's going on with the development side of things in Winter Springs?
Oh, certainly. Let me point out where we're sitting here now is Trotwood Park. Everything you see around us are things that have been, quote, developed in the past few years. So that's the positive side of development.
Yes.
And there was a lot of contention about development, and my position was, what I learned from campaigning and speaking to the citizens, is that people in Winter Springs want to see development that centers around lifestyle enhancement.
Yes.
Nice restaurants, places to go enjoy the arts, come to the parks, things like that. What they don't want to see is a radical change to the demographics of the city of Winter Springs, which comes with too much overdevelopment of the residential aspect. So what I tried to position the city for was to have that kind of positive development that was an enhancement to the way of life for everybody, without a dilution of the quality of life factors that have been the hallmark of Winter Springs for the 60 years that it's been in existence.
Okay. There was this moratorium to stop development. I still don't understand that. Can you explain that situation? Because it seemed that the commission didn't want development. You did not want that moratorium to stop development, and then the moratorium didn't happen. So I feel like sometimes the commission is pro-development and sometimes it's not development, and I'm not sure what side it's on. I mean, I understand you got to be middle ground and pick and choose.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation, because the problem is that the current commission, to a man and a woman, have campaigned exclusively on stopping development, but if you look at the votes they've actually cast, almost universally they voted in favor of every development project that's come through in the city. And the moratorium that you referred to was a vacuous campaign commitment that was made by some of the current commission. But the problem with it was that it was not surgically defined. It was much overbroad. As I said before, there is very positive development that we want to see happen in the city. And I would have supported a moratorium on the kind of development that we don't want to see, you know, the overdevelopment of residential, because residential development has three problems. It results in deforestation of our beautiful tree canopy. It disrupts the school system by bringing children into school areas that aren't really prepared to handle that.
Right.
And it brings increased traffic. And you know, we're pretty much at near capacity on the traffic that we can handle on 434. So any of that residential development was going to exacerbate the problem with those three areas. And so I was opposed to that. But the positive kind of development of bringing in some nice restaurants, bringing in the kinds of shops that make it convenient for everybody in Winter Springs to participate in the city, I was in favor of those. So the moratorium was a political instrument that was designed to appeal to the no development campaign promises that had been made, and it was just overly broad to stop absolutely every kind of development. And so when we're appealing to people who are going to invest money into bringing a Starbucks in or bringing in some new restaurant, it would have been fatal if we had sent the message that Winter Springs is hostile to every kind of development that you want to bring forward. So in the end, I used one of the rare powers that the mayor of Winter Springs has, and I vetoed that moratorium and said, bring me back one that is more narrowly crafted, and I'll be fully in support of it. But the commission was only interested in sending a political message, so they, in fact, just passed the exact same moratorium again, and then eventually they backed down and didn't bring it to fruition. So it wasn't necessary for me to veto it again, but they recognized the folly of what they were doing.
Okay, and so after they recognized that, they said, let's approve all these apartments.
They did.
I don't get it.
I don't either. It's a difference between messaging and the reality. And somehow they've been able to survive with that messaging being what people remember and not the reality of what they've actually done. And we're starting to see it in the traffic issues and a contentious relationship with the Seminole County School Board over the development plans and an inability to come to any kind of agreements with them about development of the school system.
Right. And from what I understand, we are the only city in Seminole County that will not sign some kind of memorandum, I'm not really sure, so that we participate with the county. What is that all about?
There's an interlocal agreement that involves the 7 cities of Seminole County, the county itself, and the school board, those 9 parties. And there's been a version of that in effect for the last 16 years that allowed for coordination of development, so that when a developer wanted to put in a house, the school-aged children in that house need a place to go to school, so there needs to be a coordination to make sure that the school system can accommodate that. That's the sole purpose of this agreement. Now, the agreement that was originally created in 2007 is a bit archaic now. It needs to be brought up to date. And those 9 parties have been working on that agreement for 4 or 5 years now. Everyone else came to agreement. All the other cities, the county and the school board looked at it and were able to reach agreement. But the disrespect that the rest of the county has for Winter Springs meant that they could not bring Winter Springs into that agreement. So it stands in limbo because it requires all 9 parties. So that very rational process of coordinating development amongst the parties is not in place now because of the obstinacy of Winter Springs.
But what is the reason that Winter Springs won't participate in the interlocal agreement? Because they want power over the development and not let the schools decide?
Exactly. They do not want to let the school board do the school board's job. They believe that the issues of running the schools, they should have a say in it. And that's just constitutionally not the correct position.
Yeah.
It comes from a desire for power.
Yes, control. Yeah, interesting. I still don't understand
control.
it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, it seems to me like maybe this interlocal agreement, it gives the schools the power to allow development. So the city of Winter Springs doesn't want that. They want the control to say no, even override the county.
Yeah.
That's correct.
In many ways, the people on the commission want to have their cake and eat it too, in that they want somebody else to do the dirty work of trying to stop development. They haven't been able to fulfill their own campaign promises, so now they're looking to try to lay the blame and have the school board take the responsibility for that.
Yeah. Speaking of dirty work, let's talk about the wastewater. There's some plants that are degrading. There's a lot of issues that are going on. What happened? Why hasn't this been maintained? And why are there fish kills? Why are we out of compliance with the St. Johns River Water Management District? What's going on with that?
There's an overriding problem in that in the last 3 years, the city has just been mismanaged, in that we do not have competent management in the city. And many things are not being maintained or kept up to date the way they should have.
Right, like basic reports haven't even been submitted in the past 5 years or something crazy.
Massive fines are coming from the state Department of Environmental Protection, St. Johns River Water Management District, to the city because of their mismanagement of the water and then the wastewater. Part of the, we've seen fines come down that were in the over $100,000 range. That there may be ways to negotiate that. Hopefully, we have competent management that can deal with the state and do that. But there's really something of a bunker mentality going on in the city right now, where they are only focused inward and they have a difficult time maintaining relationships with the county and the state. So I'm not optimistic that they're going to be able to conduct those negotiations for the benefit of the city. So we could see six-figure settlements coming out of the city that eventually come down to the taxpayers and the people who use our water and sewer facilities. So the fundamental problem, though, with wastewater is allowing the two facilities that process wastewater to just decline. We had competent management a few years ago that were able to keep these facilities online, and there's been a complete drain of talent at the city over the past 3 years. Every single department level head has either been resigned or forced out, so we've got a complete new cast of people that have come in. They don't have the historical, institutional legacy knowledge to understand where things need to be patched and where things need to be replaced. And so this is going to end up being a huge bill brought to the city, because when you don't know what you're doing, you completely overbuild and overspec, and that's what we're seeing now. So they're talking about $40, $50 million worth of upgrades that in the under proper management.
Do we have that money?
No, no. The city will rely some on COVID relief money that's coming in to help offset some of that. They'll do their best to try to get some money from the state, but as I said, their relationship with the state agencies is at a putrid level right now. So my confidence that they'll be able to get support from the other agencies that could otherwise help, I have very low confidence that that will happen. So at the end of the day, it'll be the taxpayers and the people who pay their water bills to the city that will end up footing the bill for that.
Wow. So wastewater. You would kind of explain to me recently about potable versus unpotable. And potable you can drink, and non-potable is for more of irrigation. And so the wastewater is for our irrigation. But I am hearing that there's some parts of Winter Springs that's using drinking water, potable water, for the irrigation.
Yes, the irrigation has either potable or non-potable water options, depending on where you live in the city. About 1/6 of the city has been plumbed to use recycled water for irrigation. This goes back 20 years ago when the wastewater plants generated water that had to go somewhere. So rather than just spraying it out into the atmosphere, which is what you normally do with it, some piping was put in place to be able to provide that water to citizens. And since this was a waste product, originally citizens paid $5 a month for all the water you could use for irrigation. And then as that became a more scarce resource, and we had to go to alternative sources of it, like surface water coming out of Lake Jesup, then it now became a product that had to be processed, and it was as expensive to process wastewater and lake water for irrigation as it is to process potable water. So now you find that the wastewater you put on your lawns now, if you're lucky enough to have those pipes, is at about the same rate as what you pay for potable water. And there just simply isn't enough of the wastewater product to cover the entire city. So that's why only a small portion of the city has that benefit. For instance, at my house, I do not have that. So I have no choice but to use potable water to irrigate my lawn.
And a lot of this has to do with the Lake Jesup plant that has failed because of the algae. And so that plant is not operating correctly for irrigation currently.
Well, that's in dispute. The experts who came to the commission and testified that the plant is working according to the specifications. The engineers who designed it and the city staff that implemented it believe that it was working, and it's through the mismanagement of the current staff that it's not working up to snuff as it did originally.
Okay.
But it was only intended for a very limited purpose, so it would not have been the solution to the problem. It could have if it had been built much larger than it was, but then you have the issue of providing enough infrastructure through the piping system to deliver that water
Right.
to people. So it's a long-term problem that is going to be very expensive to fix.
Do you think that this artesian well over in Parkstone is a solution to our problem that we just haven't been able to implement? Because it seems like there's potable water available to Winter Springs as part of the consumptive use permit, and there's 1 million gallons a day of potable water that's going back into Lake Jesup, and we're not utilizing in that Lake Jesup plant. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The Parkstone community owns that water, and they have been trying for years to work some kind of arrangement with the city where the city could benefit from that water. But the city in recent years has been very difficult to deal with in terms of trying to strong-arm Parkstone into giving that water over when the city has no rights to it. So Parkstone has been aggressive in trying to find a solution to the problem, but right now that is up to 1 million gallons per day of fairly fresh, good, clean water coming out of an artesian well that is doing nothing but flowing into Lake Jesup because there's no place else to put it. And that it's less than a mile away from our treatment plant, so that water could be used productively. But right now it's flowing into Lake Jesup, and it's a wasted resource that could be a solution to a lot of problems.
Wow. And there's a consent order out with about $20,000 worth of fines because of this. It hasn't been maintained in several years. And because we're not utilizing that water, St. John's is going to take it away from us. So we had 3 million gallons in our consumptive use permit, and we're not even using 1 million of the gallons that we could be using for irrigation or drinking water. And now we're going to get it taken away from us, and they might give it to Longwood. They're even talking Zephyr Hills.
Well, you ought to offer your consulting expertise to the city, because you know a lot more about that than anybody at the city does, and they could benefit from your knowledge in that area.
Thank you. I'm learning. This is all new to me as well, but you know, it's a process, and it's really simple, but you don't really think about it. You know, I don't really think about the wastewater treatment plant, you know, and now the consumptive use permit, how we get our drinking water. It's all, it's very interesting.
Nobody likes to think about wastewater because when it works, nobody has to think about it. When it doesn't work, though, it becomes a major issue.
Exactly.
When the sinks in your house are backing up, then you suddenly become very interested in wastewater.
Right, repiping your house for $25,000 or not being able to water your lawn.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about some of these issues today.
It's been my absolute pleasure. It's nice to spend some time with you, Victoria.
Yes, absolutely. All right, well, thank you so much for tuning in to I Love Oviedo Winter Springs, and stay tuned for our next video.